I knew something was wrong when my wife smiled at me while deleting a message and said, "It's just work," even though it was almost midnight and she had been guarding her phone like it contained state secrets. 10 minutes later, our doorbell rang, and when I opened it, there was a bouquet on the porch with no card, just her name on the delivery tag and one sentence scribbled across the receipt in black ink. Can't stop thinking about last night. I stood there in my socks, staring at those words while the cold air came through the doorway, and for the first time in 8 years of marriage, my own house felt like a place I had walked into by mistake. Up until that week, I would have told anybody we were solid. Not perfect, not the kind of couple who posted fake anniversary captions pretending life was a movie, but real, steady, tired in the normal way. We had routines, inside jokes, the same coffee order every Saturday, and the kind of quiet that used to feel safe. Then she started changing in ways that were small enough to deny and sharp enough to cut me anyway. She turned her screen away when I walked past. She started putting on perfume to run errands. She began taking calls in the laundry room with the water running, and if I asked who it was, she would laugh like I was being dramatic and say, "Why are you acting weird lately?" That was the part that got under my skin the most. Not just the distance, but the way she made my confusion sound like a flaw in me. When I carried those flowers into the kitchen and asked, as calmly as I could, "What happened last night?" she didn't even blink. She looked at the bouquet, folded her arms, and said, "You are seriously doing this because of a delivery mistake." Then she gave this little exhausted smile, like I was some paranoid stranger she had to manage, and added, "You need to stop looking for reasons to be insecure." I wanted to believe her so badly it made me feel pathetic. I actually apologized. That is the part I cannot get over. That I stood there with my heart beating like a warning siren and still said, "Yeah, maybe I'm overthinking it." She kissed my cheek after that, almost tender, and whispered, "I would never do that to you," which should have comforted me. But something in her voice felt rehearsed, too smooth, too ready. The next morning, while she was in the shower, her tablet lit up on the counter with a message preview from a contact saved under a woman's name I recognized from her office. It said, "Tell me when he leaves." My whole body went cold. I opened it, and what I saw was not office gossip, not harmless venting, not anything a husband could explain away if he loved his wife enough to lie to himself. There were weeks of messages, hotel names, fake errands, and one photo that made my knees actually give out because it was taken in my truck, in the passenger seat, while I was at work thinking my marriage was just going through a rough patch. I heard the shower shut off upstairs, and then I noticed the oldest message in the thread was from someone else entirely, forwarded into the chat with one line above it from my wife. "He still trusts him, so don't say anything yet." I read that sentence 3 times before I understood what it meant, and when I finally did, I heard footsteps coming down the hall and realized the worst part of this was not that she was betraying me. It was who she might have been doing it with. I was still staring at that message when I heard the bathroom door open, the sound of her footsteps moving casually toward the bedroom like nothing in the world was wrong. And I swear my hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the tablet. Because 10 seconds ago, my entire reality had shifted and she was out there asking about a charger like we were still arguing about groceries and what to watch at night. And I remember setting the tablet back exactly where it had been, like if I disturbed anything, the truth might somehow disappear. And when she walked in with her hair still damp and that soft, familiar expression on her face, something inside me split in a way I don't think I'll ever be able to explain, because I was looking at the same woman I had loved for 8 years, and at the same time someone I didn't recognize at all. I tried to keep my voice steady when I said, "Who's texting you about when I leave?" And for just a second, something flickered in her eyes, something quick and sharp that told me I hadn't imagined any of this. But it disappeared almost instantly, replaced by irritation so controlled it felt rehearsed. And she let out this slow breath like I had just asked her the most exhausting question in the world, before saying, "Are you seriously going through my stuff now?" And I told her I wasn't going through anything, that it popped up, that I just wanted an explanation, and she actually laughed. Not nervous, not guilty, just dismissive, like she had already decided this entire conversation was beneath her, and said, "It's a joke. We mess around like that at work. You wouldn't understand because you don't have that kind of environment." And the way she said that, like I was small, like I was outside of something bigger and more important than my own marriage, hit harder than the message itself. I didn't back down, not this time, and I asked her straight, "Then why are there hotel names in your messages?" And that's when the room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way I felt in my chest more than anything else, because she stopped moving, turned slowly, and looked at me like I had crossed a line that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago. And she said quietly, "You went through everything." And there was something colder than anger in her voice, something measured, and then she added, "Do you have any idea how violating that is?" And I felt my chest tighten because somehow she had flipped it. Somehow I was the one being judged now, and I told her I wouldn't have looked if she hadn't been acting different, if she hadn't been hiding things, if there wasn't a message telling someone to wait until I left my own house, and she just shook her head slowly like I was spiraling into something embarrassing. Then she said, "You're twisting things because you want something to be wrong," in that same calm tone, like she was explaining something obvious to a child, and I felt this wave of anger rise in my chest, because she wasn't even denying it anymore. She was rewriting it, reshaping it into something that made me the problem, and before I could say anything, she added, almost casually, "And honestly, if you keep acting like this, you're going to ruin everything for both of us." And I don't know why that word stuck with me, but it did, because she didn't say our marriage, she didn't say us, she said everything. And in that moment, with the messages still burned into my head, and that photo I couldn't unsee, I realized she wasn't afraid of losing me at all. She was afraid of something else being exposed, something bigger than just an affair. And as she reached for her phone and quickly turned the screen away from me, I noticed the name at the top of the notification bar for just a second before it disappeared, and it was someone I knew well enough that my stomach dropped before my brain could even catch up. "You're twisting things you don't understand," she said, stepping closer, lowering her voice like she was trying to calm me down, like I was the unstable one in this situation, and she was the only thing keeping it together. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat as I stared at her, waiting for something real, some crack in the performance. But all I got was this controlled, almost practiced patience. "Those messages aren't what you think," she continued, shaking her head slowly. And then she reached for my arm like she used to when I was stressed, like this was just another moment she could smooth over. "You've been distant lately, you've been suspicious, and now you're creating a story that isn't even real." I pulled my arm back without thinking, and that's when her expression changed. Not into guilt, but into something sharper, offended, like I had just insulted her by not playing along. "Don't do that," she said quietly, and there was a warning in it that I had never heard before. "You're crossing a line right now." I almost laughed at that because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'm crossing a line?" I said, my voice finally breaking through the calm I had been forcing. "There are messages about hotels, about waiting until I leave, about you telling someone I still trust him, and I'm the one crossing a line?" She exhaled like she was exhausted, like I was dragging her into something pointless, and then she did something that made my stomach twist even tighter. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Yes, you are, because you're choosing to believe the worst version of me instead of trusting your wife." The way she said, "your wife," felt deliberate, like she was reminding me of my role, not hers. I could feel myself slipping, not because I believed her, but because part of me wanted to, part of me needed this to not be what it looked like. "Then explain it," I said, quieter now, almost pleading despite everything in me screaming not to. "Explain the message, explain the hotels, explain why someone needs to know when I leave my own house." For a moment, just a moment, she hesitated, and I saw it. That tiny pause where the truth almost surfaced, and then it was gone. Her face softened, and she stepped closer again, gentler this time, like she was dealing with something fragile. "It's about a surprise," she said softly. "I didn't want you to find out yet, and now you've gone and ruined it by snooping and jumping to conclusions." I stared at her, trying to process that, trying to force it into something that made sense, but it didn't fit. None of it fit. Not the tone of the messages, not the secrecy, not that sentence about trust. "A surprise," I repeated, and she nodded, placing a hand on my chest like she could steady me. "Yes, and now it's probably pointless because you've already decided I'm some kind of liar." I wanted to ask more. I wanted to push harder. But something stopped me. Not trust, not forgiveness, just this overwhelming sense that I was standing on the edge of something worse, something I wasn't ready to see yet. So I stepped back, nodded slowly, and said, "Okay," even though nothing was okay, even though every instinct in me was screaming that I was being played. She relaxed immediately, like tension had left her body all at once, and she even smiled. A small, relieved smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly, and then she walked past me like the conversation was over. That night, she fell asleep faster than I had ever seen, like she didn't have a single thing weighing on her, while I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every look, every pause. Around 2 a.m., her phone buzzed softly on the nightstand, and I told myself not to look, that if I looked again, I would be crossing whatever invisible line she had drawn. But then it buzzed again, and this time the screen lit up just enough for me to see one word in the preview before it went dark again. It wasn't a name I didn't recognize. It was my brother's. It was my brother's name on her phone, glowing faintly in the dark like something I wasn't supposed to see, like a truth that slipped out by accident and couldn't be taken back. For a second, I convinced myself I was imagining it, that my brain was connecting dots that weren't there. But then the phone buzzed again and I saw it clearly this time, his name, and a message that only showed the first few words before the screen dimmed. "Is he asleep?" I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just lay there staring at the ceiling while something inside me collapsed in slow motion. Because out of everything I had feared, everything I had tried to prepare myself for, this was the one thing I had never even considered. I turned my head slowly and looked at her, sleeping on her side, peaceful, untouched by whatever storm had just torn through me. And I remember thinking how convincing she was, how easily she could exist in two completely different realities at once. My brother wasn't just someone I knew. He was someone I trusted without question, someone who had stood next to me on my wedding day, someone who had sat in this same house laughing with us, eating at our table, calling her his sister. I felt this wave of heat rush through my chest, not just anger, but something deeper, something that felt like humiliation, like I had been the only person in the room who didn't understand the joke. I don't know how long I stayed there before I reached for the phone. My hand hesitated inches away from it because I could already hear her voice in my head, accusing me, flipping it back on me, telling me I was the one breaking trust. And for a split second I almost pulled back. But then I thought about that message, about the timing, about the way she had looked at me earlier and told me I was choosing to believe the worst version of her, and something in me hardened in a way I didn't recognize. I picked up the phone. It was locked. Of course it was locked. And not with the code I knew. I tried it anyway, the one she had used for years, and it failed immediately. That alone felt like a confirmation I didn't want, another quiet piece of evidence that things had changed long before I realized. I set the phone back down carefully, exactly where it had been, because now I wasn't just hurt. I was thinking, and thinking in a way that felt dangerous. Like I was stepping into a version of myself I had never needed before. The next morning she acted normal again, almost too normal. Making coffee, asking if I wanted eggs, brushing past me like nothing had shifted overnight. I watched her differently now. Every movement, every word, every glance feeling like it meant more than it used to. "You okay?" she asked at one point, tilting her head slightly, studying me with that same careful softness. and I forced a nod, forcing my voice to stay even when I said, "Yeah, just didn't sleep great." She smiled, sympathetic, reached out and touched my arm, and for the first time I had to fight the urge to pull away like her touch meant something else entirely. I didn't confront her about my brother. Not yet. I needed to know if what I saw was real, if there was any version of this that wasn't exactly what it looked like. So instead, I did something that made me feel sick, even as I was doing it. I texted him. I kept it casual, something simple, something normal. "Hey man, you around later?" I stared at the screen after sending it, my heart pounding like I was about to catch someone in a lie before they even knew they were being tested. His reply came faster than I expected. "Yeah, why?" Nothing strange in that. Nothing suspicious. Just him being him. And for a second, just a second, I felt stupid again, like I was spiraling over nothing, like maybe there was some explanation I couldn't see yet. Then another message came in from him before I could even respond. "Everything okay? You sound off." I looked up from my phone, and that's when I saw her standing in the doorway watching me, completely still, her expression unreadable. And in that moment I realized something that made my stomach drop even harder than before. She wasn't surprised I had texted him. She was waiting to see what I would say. She wasn't surprised I had texted him. She was watching me like she already knew how this was going to play out, like I had just stepped into something she had rehearsed 100 times in her head. I tried to act normal, like I hadn't noticed the way she was standing there too still, too quiet, like she was measuring my reaction instead of just reacting to it. "He said he's around later," I told her, keeping my voice neutral, and she nodded slowly, almost thoughtfully, before saying, "That's good. You two haven't spent time together in a while." And there was something about the way she said it that didn't sit right, like it carried a second meaning I couldn't quite grab yet. I left for work that morning with this pressure in my chest that wouldn't go away, like I was walking around with a truth I hadn't fully uncovered but already knew would destroy me. Every interaction felt off. Every memory started rearranging itself into something darker. Moments that used to feel normal suddenly looking staged, like I had been watching a version of my life that wasn't entirely real. I kept replaying that message, "Is he asleep?" over and over again, trying to convince myself there was another explanation, that maybe it was about something else, something harmless. But the more I thought about it, the less believable that felt. By the time evening came, I had already decided I needed to see him face to face. Not because I was ready to accuse him, but because I needed to look at him and figure out if I could still recognize the person I thought I knew. When he walked into the bar, he looked exactly the same as always. Relaxed, easy smile. That familiar way he clapped my shoulder and said, "You look like you haven't slept in a week," like he was just my brother and nothing else. For a second, I almost believed it. Almost convinced myself that everything in my head was wrong, that I had let suspicion twist something innocent into something ugly. We sat down, ordered drinks, and he started talking about work, about random things, filling the silence like he always did. And I just watched him, studying every expression, every pause, waiting for something to slip. "So what's going on?" he finally asked, leaning forward slightly, his tone shifting just enough to show he knew this wasn't a casual hangout. I hesitated, feeling that same internal war between confronting him and holding back until I knew more. And then I said, "I saw your name on her phone last night." He didn't react the way I expected. No shock, no immediate denial, just a small pause, a flicker of something that passed too quickly for me to fully read. And then he leaned back, exhaled, and said, "Okay." And that response hit me harder than if he had panicked, because it felt controlled, like he had already prepared for this moment. "And she had messages asking if I was asleep," I added, my voice tighter now, and his jaw shifted slightly before he forced a shrug. "We've talked a few times," he said casually, too casually, like he was trying to make it smaller than it was. "It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. Those 3 words echoed in my head like something breaking. I stared at him, searching for any sign that he understood what he was saying, what it sounded like. But he just held my gaze. Calm, steady, like this was something I should accept. "Why would she need to know if I'm asleep?" I asked quietly. And this time there was a longer pause, a crack in the composure, just enough for me to see it. He rubbed the back of his neck, looked away for a second, and then said, "You're reading into it, man. You always do this when something feels off." That was new. That wasn't him being defensive. That was him turning it back on me, using the same language she had used, the same tone, the same strategy. And that's when it clicked in a way that made my stomach drop even further. This wasn't just coincidence. This wasn't 2 separate conversations. This was coordinated. I leaned forward, my voice lower now, sharper, and said, "Have you been in my house when I wasn't there?" His eyes snapped back to mine, and for the first time, I saw something real break through. Not guilt exactly, but something close enough to it that I felt it in my chest. And then he said, "You're not ready to hear the answer to that. You're not ready to hear the answer to that." The way he said it wasn't aggressive. It wasn't even loud. But it landed like something final, like a door closing in a place I didn't know I had access to. I just sat there staring at him, trying to process how we had gotten to this moment, how the person I trusted more than anyone outside my marriage was now looking at me like I was the one who couldn't handle reality. "Try me," I said, and my voice didn't sound like mine anymore. It sounded flat, drained, like something had already broken and was just waiting for confirmation. He exhaled slowly, leaned forward, and lowered his voice like what he was about to say needed to stay contained, like it was something fragile or dangerous. "It's not what you think," he started, and I almost laughed because that was exactly what she had said. Word for word, the same script, the same setup, and suddenly I felt like I was sitting in the middle of something that had been built around me without me ever noticing. "Then tell me what it is," I pushed, and he hesitated again. Longer this time, his fingers tapping lightly against the table like he was buying time. "She talks to me," he finally said, and even that felt like a deflection, like he was offering me the smallest piece possible to see if I would accept it and stop digging. "About what?" I asked, and he met my eyes for a second before looking away again. "About you," he said quietly. That answer hit in a way I didn't expect, not relief, not anger, just confusion layered with something darker. "About me?" I repeated, and he nodded. "Yeah, about how things have been, about how you've been distant, how she feels like you don't see her anymore," he said, and the words sounded familiar, too familiar, like I had already heard them somewhere else. I leaned back, shaking my head slowly, trying to make sense of it. "So she texts you in the middle of the night asking if I'm asleep to talk about our marriage?" I asked, and he didn't answer right away, which was answer enough. "Sometimes," he said finally, but there was no conviction in it, no weight, just something thin and incomplete. I felt my chest tighten again, that same pressure building, because nothing he was saying lined up cleanly. Everything felt like fragments of something bigger he wasn't willing to say out loud. "Have you met up with her?" I asked next, and this time he didn't even try to answer immediately. His silence stretched just long enough to make everything louder in my head. Every doubt, every suspicion, every moment I had brushed aside suddenly rushing back all at once. "We've talked," he said again, and I leaned forward, my hands pressing against the table as I locked onto him. "That's not what I asked," I said, and for the first time, my voice carried something sharp enough that people at the next table glanced over. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and whatever he saw made his expression shift slightly, like he realized this wasn't something he could smooth over anymore. "Yeah," he admitted quietly. "A few times." The words hung there between us, heavy, undeniable, and I felt something inside me go completely still. Not explode, not shatter, just stop. In my house? I asked, and this time my voice dropped even lower, almost calm in a way that felt unnatural. He swallowed, his eyes flickering for just a second, and that was all I needed before he even answered. But I still waited, because I needed to hear it, needed to know exactly how far this went. Not like that, he said quickly, too quickly, and I could hear it now, the panic starting to creep in around the edges. It wasn't what you think, I cut him off, because I couldn't listen to another version of that sentence. Then what was it? I asked, and he opened his mouth, hesitated, and then closed it again, like he couldn't find a version of the truth that wouldn't destroy everything. That silence said more than anything else he could have told me. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor louder than it should have. And for a second, I just looked at him, trying to reconcile the person in front of me with the brother I thought I had. "You should have told me," I said quietly. And he nodded, like he knew that, like he had known it all along. "I tried," he said under his breath, almost to himself, and that made me stop. "Tried what?" I asked, turning back toward him, and he looked up at me with something that almost resembled regret before he said the one thing I wasn't prepared for. "I tried to tell you months ago," he said, "but she told me if I did, you'd never believe me anyway." "I tried to tell you months ago," he said, "but she told me if I did, you'd never believe me anyway." That sentence didn't just land. It rearranged everything I thought I understood, like someone had quietly flipped the entire story while I wasn't looking. I just stood there, staring at him, trying to process what that even meant, because now this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about something being built behind my back with intention, with planning, with a version of me already written into it as the guy who wouldn't see the truth even if it was handed to him. "What were you trying to tell me?" I asked slowly, my voice tight but controlled, because I could feel something dangerous rising in me and I was trying to keep it contained. He rubbed his face like he was exhausted, like this had been sitting on him longer than I realized, and for a moment he didn't answer, which only made everything worse. "That she's been unhappy for a long time," he said finally, and I felt my jaw tighten because that wasn't new. That was the same narrative she had been feeding me, the same way she had been reshaping things to make this feel like it was somehow my fault. "That's not what you tried to tell me," I said, shaking my head, stepping closer to the table again. "Don't give me something vague. What exactly did you try to tell me?" He looked up at me then, and there was something heavier in his expression now, something that made my chest tighten before he even spoke. "That it wasn't just talking," he said quietly. The room felt smaller all of a sudden, like the air had thickened. "How long?" I asked, and I don't think I've ever been more afraid of an answer in my life. He hesitated again, but not for long this time. "A few months," he admitted, and I let out this breath that didn't feel like relief or anger, just something hollow leaving my body. "A few months," I repeated, almost under my breath, trying to connect that timeline to everything I had missed, every late night, every excuse, every moment I had chosen to trust instead of question. "And you were just going to what? Keep doing it?" I asked, looking at him like I didn't recognize him anymore. "It wasn't supposed to keep going," he said quickly, and now there was urgency in his voice, like he needed me to understand something before I walked away. "It got complicated." I laughed then, but there was no humor in it, just disbelief. "Complicated," I echoed, because of all the words he could have chosen. That was the one he went with. "You don't accidentally end up in something like this with your brother's wife and call it complicated." He flinched at that, finally, like the reality of what this was had broken through whatever justification he had been holding on to. "You think I don't know that?" he shot back, his voice rising for the first time. "You think I haven't been trying to figure out how to fix this without blowing everything up?" That stopped me, not because it made sense, but because it revealed something else, something I hadn't considered yet. "Fix what?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. He opened his mouth, then closed it, like he had already said too much, like he was standing on the edge of something he wasn't supposed to reveal. "Fix what?" I repeated, sharper this time, and he shook his head, looking away. "It doesn't matter anymore," he muttered, but that only made it matter more. "Yes, it does," I said, stepping closer again, my voice low and steady now, the kind of calm that comes right before something breaks. Because right now, all I know is that my wife and my brother have been lying to me for months, and you're sitting here telling me there's more I don't understand. He looked back at me slowly, and whatever was in his eyes then made my stomach drop in a way I didn't think was possible anymore. "There is more," he said quietly. And for the first time since this started, I wasn't sure I actually wanted to hear it. "There is more," he said quietly. And the way he looked at me made it feel like whatever came next wasn't just going to hurt. It was going to change how I saw everything that came before it. I stood there for a second, caught between wanting the truth and wanting to walk away before it could get any worse. But I already knew that wasn't an option anymore. "Say it," I told him, my voice low, steady, like I was bracing myself for impact. He hesitated, then leaned forward slightly, dropping his voice like this was something that needed to stay contained, even now. "It didn't start the way you think," he said, and I felt that familiar frustration spike again, because I was tired of hearing that line, tired of everything being framed like I was the one misunderstanding something obvious. "Then tell me how it started," I said, sharper this time, and he nodded slowly, like he had already accepted there was no way out of this conversation. "She came to me about you at first," he began, and I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to listen instead of interrupt. "She said you'd changed, that you weren't present anymore, that she felt alone even when you were there." I almost cut him off right there because I had heard all of that before, from her, in the same words, the same tone. But something about the way he was saying it made me hold back. "She said she didn't know how to talk to you anymore without it turning into an argument or you shutting down," he continued. And I felt this strange mix of anger and doubt twist together in my chest. Because part of me recognized moments like that, small ones, moments I hadn't thought mattered this much. "So what?" I said, shaking my head. "That turns into this?" I gestured between us, like the word itself was too ugly to say out loud. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling now, like he was finally running out of ways to soften what he had done. "It wasn't supposed to," he said again, but there was less conviction in it now, more weight. "She leaned on me. I listened, and then it just—" He trailed off, like finishing that sentence would make it real in a way he couldn't undo. "And you didn't think to stop?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. "At any point, you didn't think, maybe I shouldn't be the person she runs to about her husband?" He didn't answer right away, and that silence said more than anything else. "I did," he said finally, quieter now. "More than once. That's why I tried to tell you." I let out a bitter breath, shaking my head. "You didn't try hard enough," I said, and he flinched slightly, like he knew that was true. For a moment, neither of us spoke, and the weight of everything just sat there between us, heavy, suffocating. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding since the moment I saw his name on her phone. "Does she love you?" The words felt foreign coming out of my mouth, like I was asking about someone else's life, not mine. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I could see the conflict in his face before he answered. "I don't think she loves either of us the way we think she does," he said. That answer hit differently than anything else, not sharp like a betrayal, not explosive like anger, just empty, like everything I had built my life around suddenly didn't have the meaning I thought it did. I stared at him, trying to understand what that even meant, but before I could say anything, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out without thinking. It was a message from her. "I think it's time we stop lying to him.